thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode. As you know, the current crisis in Myanmar is extremely concerning, and we appreciate that you're taking the time to be informed about what's happening. There's value even in just becoming aware and helping to inform others. So please consider sharing this episode so that more people may learn about what is really happening in the country, as it's critical to ensure that this issue remains present in the public discourse. For now, let's get on to the interview that follows. I'm here talking to Maw Htin Aung. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Insight Myanmar podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so this is a very tense time. I know that many people now are under enormous pressure, in enormous danger, and I just want to check in with you before we begin this. Is there anything that we should be sensitive to discussing or revealing about yourself regarding the situation, the dangers now to ensure your safety?
Well, it seems since the military coup in Myanmar, like the whole country is no longer safe. So regardless of what you said or, what you do, the decision is made arbitrarily. So I think it is fine because we're in this all together.
Okay, this is a difficult time, and let's try to get through it together and try to understand in the time that we have here a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing, what you have been doing the last 6 weeks. But let's start with learning a little bit about you and your background first. Can you take us back and tell us a bit about where you're from and a little bit about your family life and community growing up?
Yeah, it was not very complicated. I was born in Kachin, Myitkyina, so I'm an ethnically a Kachin. But I grew up and I raised in Yangon, so most of my adult life is in Yangon. My parents were also Kachin, and they brought us here to Yangon because they wanted to flee the raging civil war in my native state. And yeah, I was educated in Yangon, and also I went to school in Yangon for my bachelor degree in computer science. But then they were considered like really dark year because these were the year under the military rule. So we did not really have a proper education. So right after I finished my bachelor degree and I started working in the humanitarians and development field, helping people, I was always thinking of like how to further my education. And then I got an opportunity in 2009 to study in Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So since then, when I came back, I was engaged more in the community mobilizations and also policy advocacy.
You had talked about being Kachin, being born in Myitkyina, which is the far north of the country, and then coming and continuing your education in Yangon. And I'd just like to take a moment and look at that, examine what your experience was like there. So you were an ethnic Kachin, and in terms of the community you grew up in Yangon and also who you went to school with, were you surrounded by other people in the Kachin community, or was it more like Bamar fellow students and Bamar people in your neighborhood? What after you moved, what were those early years like?
Yeah, because I started my kindergarten in Yangon and also my primary school in Yangon. So I wasn't like facing these whole culture shock like someone who has transfer school, like in the middle school. So I was lucky, so I did not have that kind of culture shock. But yeah, I am a minority in the school. At that time, all the school were like state school. There is no private school or like international school in Myanmar, like we have now. So we gone through all these like state education system. So in the state school, like I'm a Kachin and also like my consider myself a Christian, but in the state school, most of my friends, teachers, and the system is like pretty much Buddhist centrist, meaning like I grew up reciting or hearing the Buddhist prayers and chanting. So but at the time I didn't feel like excluded, maybe because I started the education early on, so I the language skill does not impede me, like from learning. But yeah, aside from like some instances where some of the Buddhist nationalistic, like teacher want us all to, like pray the Buddhist, like prayer, because he is basically thinking that he is teaching a good manner to his students. So aside from that kind of like clashes, I think I do not have a very oppressive culture at school. Instead, I was able to learn, like how a different, like communities, like culture, and I was able to adapt, like to different cultures and society, like that are different from my home.
Right, right. And I'm interested to explore that just a little bit more because on this podcast platform, especially prior to the coup, we were mainly focused on telling stories about the Buddhist experience in Myanmar. We would talk to Burmese Buddhists who would share their background of practice or tradition. And we spoke to many foreigners who sometimes identified as Buddhist and sometimes didn't, but in most cases were intensively practicing some kind of meditation or tradition of some kind while they were here or were a monastic. And so I'm really curious to get your view as a Burmese national and a Kachin ethnic group and a non-Buddhist that was living in and integrating into a Buddhist society in school and in your community. And then later on, what was that experience like being an outsider looking in on the way that Buddhism was manifesting in the community in national ways, in education, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we all went under like state education system, so I don't think there is an explicit, order or instruction by the Ministry of Education to practice, like Buddhism at school. But it was because most of the teachers and the headmaster are Buddhists, and especially like when I grew up, like I think that's under the military dictatorship, and the military is also trying to project their image as the guardian of Buddhism. So I think they unknowingly, like trying to pass down the instructions, although this is not law. They would say that the schools are required to have like Buddhist chanting and prayers in the morning before all the classes, begin. And then, like they have to do all these, like Buddhist religious ceremonies like Waso robing ceremony, and also the Dinjut, like the light festival, and all these, like Buddhist observant days, are practiced at state school. So growing up in this kind of system, I wasn't really, I mean, like disturbed, because most of the teachers also respect, have respect for the different religion. So I was exempted, like from most of the Buddhist religious activities. But that is, I cannot represent all the other like state school, because my school was considered like one of the best school in Myanmar in terms of basic education. So we have like lots of teachers that are actually tolerant and progressive. But there are some other schools, like which might not be so fortunate student, which might not be so fortunate like me. So they may feel like uncomfortable, like blending in. But in my case, I think I blended in well with these kind of like Buddhist practices at school.
Right. So it sounds like where you were living, where you're going to school, it was more of a progressive, diverse community where you were able to be who you were from your own background and be, and by and large, be accepted into that community. So that's really great. As you left that school and you started to enter wider society, with whether that was work or socially or just in the just getting around the city itself or any other environment you found yourself in, how did that strike you as being a minority both ethnically and religiously outside of the dominant religion and background? Did what was your experience at that point? Was it similar to as you were in school, or were there difficulties?
I mean, it is also the same like in Myanmar. Like if you go to the offices, government offices or like public spaces, you cannot escape from the influence of Buddhism. For instance, like in the government offices, like whether it's the smallest units in the ward and the villages, the ward administration office will have like Buddha statue, and like they have a little shrine, like that is parked, like above, like that is stuck against a wall, and that is a usual sin. So you can't really like escape like from public life about the influence of Buddhism. So, but I think that doesn't bother me. But what bothered me was more on the policy, and also the very subtle discrimination, like that some people face in the government, like entering government services, and also in the social or like legal status, that's what bothered me. But the influence of like Buddhists in the society does not bother me. But some people wanted to uh, go a step further. They wanted to bring like Buddhism into the legal circle, or they wanted to codify the influence of like Buddhism into the society. I think that's where it becomes problematic.
Can you give some examples of how that's happened?
Yeah, there are two kinds that happen. Like one is very subtle, and you don't, because in the government services, if you are coming from a minority, and also minority both in ethnicity and also religious minority, then you have the double minority status. That means that your promotion is not likely to come very quickly compared to your peers.
Mm-hmm.
So that is not codified, but that is what the society or your supervisor may practice, because you hold different beliefs than yours. This is very subtle. Another like more like legally, coded, it's that encourage this kind of practice is in the registrations. They have like we have a national like citizenship, like scrutiny cards, but these cards, you just looking at these cards, like you immediately know not just your like your name or date of birth, but where you come from, and also what ethnicity, and also what religions you adhere to. So these are the things that caused, a lot of discrimination in hiring, and also, like just for the authority, encourage the behavior of discrimination. So that's in the legal. And also, like lately, you have the Buddhist marriage, like law, like that. That is, basically trying to help protect the Buddhist women. But then, if you actually dissect the law, like you find the element of codifying, like the influence of like Buddhism in the law. So these are the things like that that I saw like are more problematic than the natural influence of Buddhism in the society.
Right, right. It seems like when the British were here during colonial times, they really tried to categorize everyone, put labels on everyone's background, and keep them in separate boxes. And from what you're saying, it sounds like that's been a practice that has been carried over as quite a bit in the current regime.
Yeah, probably because I do not know what kind of citizenship card that the British has used, but the one that we're using right now is, I would say, pretty racist.
Right, right. So let's get back on your educational and career path that you were getting into at just the beginning. You were mentioning how you came back from a university in Hong Kong. I believe it was in 2011 when the reforms just started. Can you take us back to what was happening in the country and what you were doing at that time?
Yeah, I mean, after I finished my school, like a bachelor degree, and I started working in the humanitarians and development assistant, and what we call like non-government, like organization jobs. And then I realized, it's we really need to make our policy and law better, like if we want a better country. So that's how I started more interested in the policy advocacy, meaning like advocating good policies, helping government to change the better law. And I got a chance to study in Hong Kong Polytechnic University in 2010. And right after I came back, and it was a good time because the country has recently opened up, and also, although it was not a fully democratic constitution, but it has a lot of elements of democratic, practices like check and balances, the legislative, executive, and also judiciary has been separated and practice, different power, although the military holds like a privileged class and also has impunity. But that has created a lot of political institutions, that make it possible for citizens to be engaged in the making of policy that has influence in their daily lives. So I started working in the natural resource management and natural resource governance area, trying to mobilize the community as well as, providing technical assistance to the government regarding what should they do with transparency, and like how can they get help, like by being transparent, like practicing transparent practices. So these are the things, like that I've done when I came back from Hong Kong. And then I got another chance to study in the US in 2012 and 2014 at the Cornell University. That time, I studied public administrations, knowing that that's where I'm really interested, and that's where I can be a big help in transforming my country into the one that we all can be proud of. So I came back in 2015, and also, since then I was helping an international organization as a country manager to advance, and support the government in transforming their public policy regarding natural resources and also public financial management.
Can you share a bit more about what you mean by natural resources? What exactly were you advising and what was going on with natural resources at that time?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back a little bit about the context of the country, Myanmar is very rich in natural resources, meaning it has rich minerals. I think we're the only country in the world that has the high quality jadeite, like jade, which is pretty much sought after by Chinese people because of its historical and mythical values. And also we produce a lot of other like color stone, like rubies, sapphires. These are the top grade. So, and also we have a lot of minerals like gold, copper. So we are pretty rich in that. In addition to that, we have some sizable number of like oil and gas also. And also natural forests. Teak has been famous Burmese product for century. But although we have rich in natural resources, we have the structural problem because these natural resources are endowed in the ethnic area because natural resources like what you find mostly is in the mountain area. So that's where ethnic minority has inhabited that. So the problem with natural resource extraction in Myanmar is that central government has been, extracting, like these natural resources and sustaining the budget of the country because the government budget, half of them is coming from selling of those natural resources that which I mentioned earlier. And then, although they have gotten all these, resources, half of them from the ethnic state. But if you look at the development of these ethnic, like people and the region, it was completely different from the plain region where majority of Burma people live. For instance, the electricity, until like recently, there is no electricity for most of the ethnic state. Although the central part of the country pretty much enjoy subsidized electricities, and also government provided infrastructure, but that was not the case for the ethnic state. And this has been going on for like decades. So as someone, who got really interested in this kind of structural inequality, and I found that, the natural resources management is the one area that we can improve. If we can, amend the structural injustice, that exhibited in the natural resource management as well as in the allocation of budget, we can have a better system, like that, a system that treats, like its citizen more equally rather than, systematically sidelining or discriminating the ethnic state. So with that, that has really encouraged me to work in these natural resource management and governance, because I believe that having a good system will definitely put us closer to peace and reconciliation in the future.
Right. And so how did that work go when you were charged with looking at the policy on natural resources? Did you feel that progress was made in that area during the civilian government?
Yes, I mean, although not as much as like I would like to see, but there is some progress. Like now, we can track down, like how much of the resources has been extracted, and also like how much money government is getting, like in terms of taxes and production sharing. And these information are now becoming online and no longer secrets. Before that, like even talking about that is like a state secret and crimes. Like you could be arrested, like for talking about this kind of thing. But now it's no longer a secret, and everybody can debate about oh, this is not right, or like this shouldn't be the case. So I think these are the kind of visible development that I see. Of course, like there's some obstacle because two decades of military installment of bureaucrats, in their own liking, has really create a dysfunctional bureaucracy, like who will not look after the interests of the people, but look after the interests of the companies, who bribe them, or and so we are basically helping the government to transform their own bureaucracies to become more akin to like the needs of the local people. And we are helping government in terms of how can they make better decision about whether to grant a license or grant a concessions to the company. So yeah, I mean, there has been some small little gains in transparency, and also the change in policy and practices are also visible, but it is far from over and far from enough.
Right, right. And why did you come to see natural resources as one of the main things that you want to be involved with? You mentioned how it connected to overall peace and stability, corruption, ethnic rights. It sounds like to you, this issue was really deserving of a primary focus in looking at overall government reform. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is because although I have to remind, people about when I say like these, like amending these natural resource management would put us closer to peace and reconciliation. It doesn't mean that the natural resources are the primary cause of conflict in Myanmar. I can say that, it is also fueling the conflict, but it is not the primary cause. But if you study the conflict in Myanmar, they all started from the political grievances, like not having the autonomy, not having the say in the managing the resources, and the people in their state. So that is how the political grievances begin. But then, you have the natural resources come into play, because the natural resources are exploited both by the government and as well as the ethnic arms organization. So it also kind of like prolong the civil war situation. But then, although these natural resources are extracted and depleted, you don't see much of its benefit going to the people, but much of it is also plundered by the corrupt military, bureaucrats, and the private sector. So it is not helping the people, like who live in these natural, richly, like endowed area. So the thinking was like, if we can make it right, if we can make these natural resources benefiting the people primarily, and then like we have less of a chance to use natural resources as a driver of conflict, because people are happy with the benefits that they receive from natural resources, and they don't see this as a primary driver of conflict. So that will really help the political stakeholders in like talking about peace and reconciliation in the future Federal Democratic Union.
Sounds like that was quite a job you cut out for yourself. Sounds quite difficult with all those competing interests to figure out a way forward with so many big players with a lot at stake, and wanting to find some way to create peace and stability and also benefit the people actually living there.
Yeah. It was not political, but not directly, but actually it is very much to do with politics at the end, about who gets what, and like how much that's trying to figure that out in a technical way, and making sure that like there is justice in the distribution. Yeah, I mean, it's also very interesting, and high risk, high return kind of work.
What were the risks?
I mean, the risks, like people, there is also, many like activists on the ground. Sometimes they are abducted because they speak out against the natural resource extractions in their area. And also the authority or the militias, Myanmar has still a lot of militias who are involved in these natural resource extracting businesses. So what you said and like what you did, if those action hurts their interest, and then you are likely to become a target. So in a way that you have political enemy as well as like real enemy on the ground by advocating for the better policy. So but then, like I said, if there is a good, like resource governance, and then when people are seeing the benefits of natural resources, and when they don't see this as a driver of conflict, and then, like you have you would have been, like on the part of solving century-old, like Myanmar conflict, armed conflict and civil war. So that's what I mean by high risk and high reward.
Yeah, that's certainly high risk, high reward. So high risk in terms of putting yourself between very powerful stakeholders with a lot to lose, and high reward in terms of reversing decade or century long conflict that hasn't been sorted out and that is damaging the people being affected by it. So that was quite a high wire act without a net that you were walking through. Was in your position, did you feel safe, or were just simply by being advisor, were you also somewhat at risk given the high stakes involved?
If I'm doing this kind of job under military dictatorship, I wouldn't feel safe. But when I was working for the last 8 years, it was under the context of like semi-civilian government, so it was relatively safe. Engaging, like with these kind of policy debate with the government officials and as well as some ethnic arms organizations. But if I were to do this again in this kind of coup and also military dictatorship, I wouldn't feel safe.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that true of so many people, no matter what their profession is, no matter what it was they were doing? I mean, I after the country opened up, just speaking personally, I undertook a project to just learn about some of the different meditation traditions, just to learn about what different monks were teaching and what their historical traditions were, to be able to tell foreigners that were coming so they knew which monk was teaching what and what his history was and where they can go to practice and various sites that were of historical importance. This is not something that has nearly the degree of sensitivity of what you're talking about. And then also after that, I went on to lead pilgrimages to take meditators, pilgrims that were coming to see these sacred sites and to meditate, to give dana, to give robes to monks as part of their spiritual journey and their pilgrimage when they were here. And even things like this that were really in no way sensitive, nothing compared to what you were doing. Those were activities I never would think of doing before 2012. And so once things opened up, you did see a lot of people starting to, whether they were growing, mom and pop businesses, or they were going into the nonprofit sector, or going into some kind of ecotourism or whatever it was. They're really, these last 8 years or whatever it's been, there's really been this extraordinary blossoming taking place of people exploring their own passions and bringing that into what was on track to be a multi-layered society.
Yeah. But even I think because like you are someone who has been practicing meditation and spreading that, I think you would know that even in the Buddhist culture in Myanmar, and they tend to be pretty strict, because there is like state sanction, like sangha organizations, and other than that, I think wouldn't accept. I'm sure that you are aware of that. Some people are also imprisoned because of the different Buddhist, like belief that they hold. But yeah, so that's basically. I think under the dictatorship or kind of like closed system, the ideas, like that are different from the one practiced by the authority, and they would see this as a threat. Like they wouldn't see this as another options or things that are debatable to expand the knowledge horizon. So I think that's true under dictatorship. Not just for the sensitive or in like a normal walk. Everything. If they see that this is different from what they are doing, and they see this, they immediately thought this is a threat.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I can give you two examples in my recent interviews that illustrate that just within Buddhism alone. One of them, we talked to Tabawa Sayadaw, who has, through his monastery and his mission, has really been pushing the boundaries of what a monk in a monastery could do. And up until the reforms, they were really, every day was really a struggle. They didn't know if they were going to be able to survive one day to the next. And they weren't able to share what they were doing and how they were helping people on the margins of the community, because those just weren't things that were very acceptable to talk about. But once things started to open up and they had that freedom, they were able to properly share and expand on what it was they were doing. And more people learned, more people wanted to join, wanted to support, give donation. And so their mission was able to expand only in a free society. And a second example, I was just speaking to a monk last week, and he was referencing, he does a lot of teaching and discourses, and he was referencing how the ability of critical thought and the free exploration of ideas, even non-sensitive ideas, just ideas about grasping religious thought or spiritual instruction of some form, that he's seen a profound shift after the country started to open up, because there was just in the students, there was this greater expansion, ability, comfort of being able to not just rotely hear things and have to memorize them and follow some very strict protocol, but to be able to have a freer exchange of ideas and a freer consideration, critical thought of ideas, even within one's own mind. Yeah. So let's move on from, you were working in natural resources for some time. What year did you change your position from advising on that, and what did you do next?
Yeah, I mean, for the last 5 years until 2020, I was deeply involved in the reform of the natural resource, like governance inside the country. So I work with the government, and I also work with the civil society organizations, mobilizing on the ground, like to help change the way we manage our natural resources. And then, I started to realize that I am an outsider. And also I've been working with the parliament and the government, but I'm still an outsider. So there's some, like missing parts of that, like puzzle, that if I am an insider, I would be able to exert like more influence and direct more changes. So that's when I thought of entering the politics and holding an office position in the legislative chamber. So I decided maybe because considering reflecting on my like the past 5 years where I intensively work with the government and also all stakeholders, there are things that I could do if I become a legislative member more effectively than as an NGO manager, like working from outside. So that's why, and also I was about the right age, because I didn't like the facts that many of the legislative members are in their retirement age. I did not want my best years to be invested in the private sector and then enter into the public service only when I got retired from the best of my life. So that's also brought me, like to enter into politics in my prime time. So I decided I will run for the office, and then I enter into Shan Nationalities League for Democracy, which is Shan ethnic political parties, and the second largest political parties after National League for Democracy in Myanmar. The reason, and when I choose, like SNLD to be my running party and running mate, and then many people ask me the question because, as you know, that Myanmar is often strongly associated with the politics of identity. Like who you are, which ethnicity, and what kind of religions you adhere to, and people would only there is a belief that people will only vote to someone like whom they can relate to in terms of their own identity. But for me, I mean, like someone who believe in the progressive politics, I do not believe that in politics there should be a strong adherence to reference to identities such as like age, gender, ethnicity, religion. Someone like the constituent should vote someone who has whose merit will serve the purpose of the constituency. So that's my belief, and also with that, when I talk with the leaders from the party, and they were also thinking the same. They were thinking of transforming and the parties into a more policy-based and policy-oriented political party instead of based on the ethnic identity alone. So with that, I ran for the office in 2020 election from Northern Shan, which is also a very diverse area where you find a lot of ethnic from Kachin, Shan, Daang, and also ethnic Chinese are there. So yeah, that's how I got into the politics and the election in the last year.
Yeah, and you're also pretty young, aren't you? Most politicians in Myanmar are usually of an older age. Is that true?
Well, I was in of course, I will be in the younger age group, but I don't think I am actually that young compared to the politicians, like that are rising up in the Europe or in the US or elsewhere. I think, but yeah, considered to Myanmar standards, I would be in the younger age.
Yeah, I was speaking to a journalist last week, and she was saying something like, and you're up until 35 or 40, you're still very much considered as a youth. And
No, I mean, I'd agree because I think that also like a traditional, traditions in Myanmar, like where age, age like equalized with wisdom. So which to me is like in this kind of like information communication age that was like pretty much questionable. But you see the structural limitation for young people to enter into the politics. Like unless you are like 25, you cannot run for the lower house, and for upper house you have to be like 30. And in order to become like cabinet member, like you have to become at least 35 if you want to be a minister, and then you have to meet the threshold of like 40 years, stuff like that. So these are the structural limits also imposed by the constitution as well. And I think these all came from the traditional beliefs, like in Myanmar society.
right, right. So tell us a bit about your campaign. How did that go, and what was the result?
The campaign was a success because I expected, like people, I feel like people want a progressive politics, like that are not based on identity too much, but based on the merit of the candidate, like that they can rely on and in their constituency. I was able to talk with many remote areas, like villagers and also communities. But yeah, the understanding of the politics is no different from the people from the city, like, because there is a misnomer that people thought that, people from the rural area are not interested in politics. No, actually, that is wrong. When I do campaigning, I realized that that is wrong. And also, I did also focus a lot on the online campaign, social media campaign, because of the COVID-19 situation, where I cannot really go out and meet with the constituency, or the meeting has been limited in numbers. So I have to focus on the online campaigning, although the internet penetration has been not that great in the constituencies that I campaign. But nonetheless, I think that was a successful online campaign, and I got a lot of recognitions and encouragement from the voters. So that was really encouraging. And also, amazingly, yeah, I got the experience of what is to be a politician. So, like, throughout these campaigning periods, I don't have to worry about what to eat, or like what or like my because most of them, volunteers, and also you have a lot of people, donations, taking care of their own expenses. So it was really for me, like, coming from a different war, and learning about how the politics played out in Myanmar and how the campaigning worked out. It's really an experience of a lifetime. But unfortunately, I did not win the seat outright. I come in second. I'm the first runner up in the competition that I'm in. But I also witnessed a lot of cheating, and also before my own eyes, and also a lot of voting irregularities after we done some of the analysis of the vote. So I decided, like, to pursue the legal remedy in order to address these issues. So for the last 3 months, I've been working on gathering evidence, and opening cases in the police stations, as well as putting a complaints in the Union Election Tribunal, and waiting for the trial dates. And then, like, in the 1st of February, this military coup happened. So I was basically in limbo.
Can you give us an example of some of the types of cheating that you witnessed?
For instance, like, there's a kind of like visible vote buying, where someone would be standing in front of the polling stations with a lot of voting identification slip, which are distributed to the community. So I don't know, like, how she gathered all these voting slip, but they are also, bringing people from all over the cities, like, some has voted already, but they are bringing these kind of people again to vote again. And then, like, when I check, their fingers, some of them has been, like, covered with like a plaster, just to hide, like, because, like, after voting, like, you have to dip in the ink to mark that you have voted. So some people, like, that I caught, they try to cover their ink stain little finger with the plaster. So that is how I knew that these guys have already voted, but they came in because there was a broker in front of the polling stations, bringing people again, who has done advanced voting, some old people, some crippled, like they were brought in, and then they try to, like double vote or triple vote. So that's how I caught, in one polling station. And also there are like instances where in some like remote voting stations, you have like overvoting, meaning like according to the voting registry and the voter registries, you have like 200 eligible voters in that village. But then, like when the final tally came in, and then you have like 400 people, like voted from that village, which is also, like breaking the law, and also that is considered like cheating. So how could a village, like who has 200 registered voter voted, like 400 votes, like in the final tally? So that's how we found out, like there has been widespread, like vote cheating in my constituency, and we decided to pursue the legal remedy at back then.
Mhm. And who did you observe the vote was cheating in favor of?
That the voting, the one who won in my constituency is from another ethnic party other than not NLD. So it was yeah. So I wouldn't say that, or I do not have evidence that that person or that party has orchestrated the vote cheating. What we observe is like at the polling station level, there's a massive, double voting, and also overvoting, yeah, stuff like that.
So you're not sure exactly who was behind it.
No, I do not have. I mean, of course, I can guess, but I do not have the legal evidence or the linkages, like these vote rigging has been done by that, individual or that party.
Right, right. And you said you then went on to pursue legal remedies up through February 1st. How did that process go?
Yeah, it was a process of gathering evidence, for almost 3 months, right after the election in November 8, 2020. So right after that, I and my volunteer team worked very hard, gathering evidence on the ground, and as well as doing analysis of the whole township, and also prepare a complaint, a legal complaint letter, because it was according to the law, like we can pursue a legal remedy as a civil case. We can ask the court to annul the results that is established right now, because I am the only I am the worthy, winner, not the other one. So in order to prove that case, I have to gather a lot of evidence and submit it to the court. And so that I did in the past 3 months. And finally, the case was accepted, and also we're waiting for the trial, and also like the court, investigation. But then, like I said, in 1st of February, there was a military coup, suggesting there was a voting irregularities and voter frauds. Yeah, so that's the situation I'm in at the moment.
So where does that leave? This might be somewhat of a silly question, but just to be clear with it, where does that leave your status in pursuing legal remedies that there was vote cheating in the wake 6 weeks into a military coup?
So far, I did not have any contact from the military hunter about, what are they doing with the case, or, or whether, because they are so busy, like setting up frame to accuse, the NLD of like massive vote cheating and stuff like that. But according to my experience, I think they have no legal evidence, and as well as not following and the law. So I don't think they'll be able to prove that there is there is voting irregularities or like vote cheating by NLD.
Right. And where does that leave your case?
If the military junta has decided to look at the cases, because right now you have the new election commissioners installed by the military junta. So they might look at my case again, but I have decided that, if that is the case, I will withdraw the case because I will not put my case, like under the consideration of this military junta because one, I do not support the coup, and also I do not trust that there is integrity or like honesty in their move, in installing a new election commissioner against a democratically elected government.
Right. I want to go back to something you were saying. You were describing that you were campaigning with progressive policies. And I have an idea of what progressive policies mean in my country. It might be something slightly different in Myanmar. So, can you describe a bit what you mean by the progressive policies that you were promoting as a candidate?
Well, I mean, like in Myanmar, like I said, I believe in the politics, that does not discriminate on based on gender, age, religion, ethnicities. So whenever I meet with my constituency and set out the policies that I wanted to engage with, like based on this philosophy, I have always laid out my policy option. For instance, in terms of citizenship, like policy that our country has so, practicing so much outdated, like law. That is one area that I would say that, in the policy of citizenship, I would hold on to like one citizen. So there will not be like second class citizens. Because in Myanmar, there's a lot of the cases like even though you're born in Myanmar, like you're not a first class citizen and you're not entitled to certain rights. So I feel like this is not the case, and this is not how we build the nation. So that's like whenever I got asked, like these kind of questions, that is like I laid out my policy. Yeah, I think that way people understand, what is a good politics.
Right. And what kind of response were you getting from the people when you were meeting, when you were on the campaign trail, or I guess the virtual campaign trail with COVID?
Yeah, many people thought that like Myanmar people would be conservative and they would follow the extreme like kind of like ideas, but actually that's not true. Like when I talk about like my visions on education, my vision on citizenships, and my vision on what kind of like countries that I would like to have in the future. Um, Pretty much of all the people that I talked to accepted the idea of progressiveness. Nobody want to be discriminated. Like based on religion and ethnicities. Everyone wanted to be treated the same. They wanted the relationship between the state and citizens as more, based on merit rather than, all these, like identities.
Right, right. So let's move to the hell that these last 6 weeks have been since February 1st. What have you been doing? Where have you been involved?
I mean, last 6 weeks had been like a nightmare. Every day is a nightmare for like everyone living inside the country. But the good thing is that people woke up from the dreams and people woke up from the illusions that relying on like or like one leaders is not going to do any good for the country's democratic journey. So I think people has been realizing that and mobilizing, working collaboratively across the board. I think these are the good side of these, like Coup story. And now, like people has a common position that that is so clear that nobody would accept the military dictatorship in the future. So everybody's want to end and these military, like dictatorship now. So I think that's a good thing about that. And the bad thing is like nobody is safe. The military and the hunters, soldiers and police would came at night, day, and then they would shoot people on broad daylight, under the watchful eyes of the citizen as well as social media and under all camera. I mean, like they would cold-bloodedly, murder, like people on the street. They would randomly shoot, anyone passing by. And so this is like basically it's like a slaughterhouse situation, on the street, not just in Yangon, but every corner of the city. And at night, like they would raid it, like houses and also capture people and sometime bodies are returned the next morning. The dead bodies are returned, and then also if you observe the dead body and there is like torture, signs of torture and lots of inhumane, like treatments of the body. So these are the situation at the last 6 weeks, and people has been like calling for international communities intervention because the brutality and the barbaric acts of these army and the soldiers, police are unbearable, and also like this is happening in everybody's like watchful eye. So yeah, that's pretty much the like to sum up the last like 6 week after coup.
Right. And what have you been doing personally? How have you been involved these last 6 weeks?
Yeah, I've been helping organizations with the advising some organization with the political options like that they can pursue, or because of security reason like I couldn't mention the name of the organizations like that I'm involved or that I'm helping with, but I've been using my skills of like being able to analyze situation and also providing options and advice. So I've been using that a lot, and helping organizations that are involved in the protest movement in other like situation.
Right. And I understand you can't name the organizations you're involved with. I wouldn't want you to if you put anyone or anything at risk. I wonder if you would feel comfortable describing what it is you're advising the protest movement on, what issues are coming to you that are their questions. You don't have to, obviously, you don't have to give exactly what the advice is either, because that would also put people at risk. But generally, what kinds of concerns they're coming with and where you're helping them to find solutions.
I mean, people are off guard because of this situation, because we never expected that this would happen. Because even if you look at, why the military conducted a military coup, there is no logical reason because they're doing just fine under this 2008 constitution. So many people, wanted to find, why this happened and, what can we do? So most of my advice, I've been analyzing the situation and also providing advice on the way forward, what are the options, that hold for the country if we continue to be like that. And also what what political agenda, we should pursue. So this kind of stuff, in term relating to political agenda and also and how can we get there, what are the practical ways of, achieving our objectives. So that's the area that I'm involved in.
Yeah. And concerning that area, is there anything you can share with us in terms of what your thoughts are on how we can move forward and how we can get out of this present moment and build something better, then just about anything is better than where we're at now. But how you see a productive way forward out of this mess?
Yeah, many people are discouraged, when they don't see the clear political path. So I think for us is one thing is now getting very clear because although we have political differences with NLD, and also NLD become a symbol of oppressions, like in the past 5 years. But now people are understanding that we have a common enemy, which is the military dictatorships, to end these systems. So that is urgent and united, uniting force for everyone. So we need to exploit this opportunity because that's not going to come back. This opportunity not going to come back easily in the future. So yeah, I think we should focus all our energy into ending this military dictatorship, like once and for all. And then, like later on, we can settle our differences in politics and differences in how we perceive the country should be. And that are up for debate and consultations, But now what is the urgent and most needed is like, how do we end these military dictatorship? I think that should be our common goal and focus for the moment, instead of discussing, like other like more divisive issues. So the political stakeholders on the ground should focus on how do we end this, military dictatorship at the moment, so that we can have a future that is more open and progressive.
Right. And is that what you're finding among the people involved? Is there that kind of unity and looking at the moment, not beyond what people are trying to build and who gets what and how they work together, but more just on the present moment, no matter what background people are coming from, that they are looking to work together and create unity against this common enemy at this time?
Yeah, I think people are now realizing that, although we have political differences, we have a common enemy, or a common, like system that we dislike. So I think that is uniting, like different groups and different political stakeholders. So yeah, I believe that's uniting people.
Right. And looking at this present moment and what's going on with this crisis, I want to ask you what stands out to you. I know that's kind of a difficult question to answer because it seems like every day something new is standing out, and 6 weeks have felt like 6 years. But in looking back with all of your background, all of your educational training, all of your experience, your knowledge inside and out of Myanmar, of politics, of ethnicity, military, everything else, knowing all of that and seeing how things have progressed the last 6 weeks, what are some of the things that have stood out or surprised you?
I'm surprised by the determination of the people, from all walk of life. Normally, Myanmar history, like protests happen, but then, like when the protests are violently suppressed with gun, and they seem to tone down. But like for the 6 week, like the government has been using, like lethal force, like dispersing, using live ammunition. They have been so brutal and inhumane. But I was so surprised that people stand still and, demanding peacefully of, like what they want, and also like no sign of abating these kind of protests anytime soon. That is amazing, and that is the most profound facts, like that about this movement.
Right. And what do you think is the role of religious figures now? We've seen monks in some cases actually stand between the protesters and the military. There's the famous image in Myitkyina, in your hometown, of the Catholic nun Anne Rose New Tongue, I think her name is, who similarly tried to intervene in the military attack on civilians. different religious figures have taken different tactics as well. What is your view on what role religion and religious figures should play at this time?
Yeah, I think although I'm really much on the, incline on the secular state, but I believe that religion has a role to play in the society, especially in terms of, personal values and also spiritual values. I think that's where the religious, leaders can influence, their followers. And yeah, they have the duty to speak out the truth, about what is right and what is wrong, and what is moral and what is immoral. Unless they speak out, people, some people will be ambiguous, in making decisions. So when they speak out, I think it's much clearer for the followers, to pursue what is just and what is not. And I think having a religious leaders standing up for the cause together with the people, it means a lot, because people are spiritually secure, and also like they knew that this is like what they are doing is a just cause. And also it can persuade, some people, who are actually, like from the other side, who, who practice, the religion, and when the religions, the leaders of that religion is, asking, encouraging them, to join and the cause of justice, they might change their mind. So I think it is really important.
Yeah, well, they're the moral authority, and so they have a chance to use that moral authority in very wholesome way at this time.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, right. And how about yourself? Are you taking any precautions for your own safety?
Well, my own precautions, I'm taking that, because about like uh, but like I said, nobody inside the country right now is safe, because you could be arbitrarily arrested on the street while you're trying to buy your milk, and while you're trying to do grocery shopping, or you could be arrested at home. And there is no, reasons, legal reasons, like they would use, they can just arrest you anytime they want. So of course, I am monitoring the situation, where the arrest, whether the arrest sucker is coming closer to me or not, like that's what I'm observing. And if that is the case, then I hope I will be able to, take shelter in somewhere safe, on time. So that's how I'm taking care of my security.
Right. Yeah. Through all this talk of the terror that Burmese people are under right now for their own lives and their right and their safety, I think background of that is just the mental trauma that's going on and the mental weight this is causing to have to live like this day after day.
I think we have to do a lot of work after, like in terms of PTSD, post-traumatic, counseling, because basically, the army and the police has terrorized the whole population, by gunfire, like grenade fire and all these things. It's like a battlefield, So I'm particularly worried for the older people, and also like young children, like who might suffer uh, traumatic experience, like because of this.
Right. And currently, the movement is animated by nonviolence. The protesters have really adhered to this as much as possible. Uh, how long do you think that's viable for? Do you think that's a value that should be held on to consistently through this, or do you think other options should be explored?
I mean, for the protesters and the peaceful protester, like they should continue with non-violence tactic, but with the emphasis on self-defense. Like we have the right to self-defense. Like if the like junta forces are using lethal force against the protester, so it's not like not that like you will give up your life so easily. Like we have to fight for our life, so that is our right. So that was my preferred option. But on the other hand, like when the political like agendas are becoming clearer and more concrete, I think we'll have other options available. But meanwhile, I think nonviolent like protests with the self-defense is the way ahead.
Right, right. So many of the people listening to this are outside of Myanmar. They're people who care tremendously about what's happening there and want to help in any way they can. So one of the things that I've been asking every guest we talk to that's on the ground there, because they are in the best position to be able to speak to what is happening, how they're feeling, and what they need. For those listening outside of your country that are caring about this issue and want to help in some way, but just don't know what to do, what would you say to them? What is it that they can do from the comfort, the safety, the freedoms of their own homes and country to support you and your people right now?
I mean, first of all, I would appreciate, like their kindness in remembering us. And there are many ways that can help, like people of Myanmar at the moment. I think the first and dearest thing is like remember us in your daily prayers and also your daily, like meditation, and like sending positive energy or whatever that you're doing. Like include us. And the second is like standing in solidarity. If you find local Burmese people group and try to organize something like that, encourage like the people on the ground, because that is definitely like really heartwarming and also really boosts the morale on the ground, regardless of where you are, like what kind of activities you do. If you're standing in solidarity with the suffering, understanding like of the people in Myanmar, that means a lot to us, so please do that. And also the third is like if you are financially able to do that, I think there are many organizations now set up to help Myanmar. And also I am worried, like in the next few months, we will face some serious, like hunger out of these, like these chaos, so I think we need to prepare ready for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Thank you. So I know there's so much going on these past 6 weeks, and even before that, the context that led up to that. And I've tried to ask questions that bring your background and your involvements, but there's so much happening that very well there could have been things I've missed. Is there anything that I haven't covered with my questions that you would like to make sure to be able to use this platform to talk about now?
I think this is, I think as some of you know, this is like, I would say that this is an awakening moment for Myanmar, because you know that in 2017, we have the Rohingya issues, and we also have the issues of oppressing ethnic minority, like with the military. During that time, I think majority of the people are unaware that this kind of brutality and cruelty, like happen in the minority area. But now, like it's happening in broad daylight in this big city. So they realize that they have been lied by the military and the state, like all along. So people are willing to admit that, like they have been wrong in the past. So I think this is also the moment, like not just for the political revolution. I think a renewal of like humanity, and the values like that are enshrined in Buddhism. I think this is a real moment like that really transform a nation. So so please help us like so that we can have a better and new Myanmar that are compassionate, that are really holding and to the humanities, and also stand tall as a real democratic, countries in Asia.
Right. I mean, as bad as things are going now, if there is a way to transform and come out of this, Myanmar could become a beacon of light to the world in terms of how it's able to come together and what kinds of progressive policies and unity it can bring. And I did want to go back. What you just said reminds me. So you're talking about this kind of great awakening and communal coming together of looking back, a reckoning of things that were done before, thought before, that one is now owning and making atonement for and such, and breaking certain patterns and traditions of the past. And one thing that I've seen in terms of that happening is this sense of agency. I don't think I've ever seen such display of agency, certainly not in my experience in Myanmar, and possibly rarely anywhere in the world, of just the agency that everyone is feeling to say what they think, to say how they feel, to take actions that they think need to be taken. And I wonder what you're seeing and what you're thinking about that. Do you see a newfound sense of agency that's happening across the country now?
I think like the newfound, understanding is towards the minority. Like people has been confessing that they have belief in the wrong belief that ethnic people are revolting against the central government, and also the Rohingya are not the citizen of Myanmar and that kind of thing. So people has been reversing their position and openly asking for apology. So I think this is very good for the nation building, because the nation building process has never been completed in Myanmar. So I think this is the second chance we were given, and for the whole country to build a country that is just and treated equally, to provided equal opportunities to every citizen.
Right. Well, certainly my thoughts are with you, and I'm sure the thoughts of the listeners are as well. And really want to thank you for coming on here and spending this time to be able to talk to us and share your opinions and views and your experience. And we wish you all the best and all the support going forward.
Thank you. My pleasure for being given this chance to talk to everyone who's listening to this podcast.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this show. I understand that this is an enormously difficult time for many people these days, myself included, and just the mere fact of staying informed is helping to keep a focus on this pertinent issue. And the only way that we can do our job of continuing to provide this content at this very critical time is through the support of generous donors, listeners like yourselves. So if you found this episode of value and would like to see more shows like this on the current crisis, please consider making a donation to support our efforts. Either monthly pledges or one-time donations are fully appreciated, and all funds go immediately into the production of more episodes like this one. Thank you deeply in advance, and best wishes at this time. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are resisting the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Every cent goes immediately and directly to funding those local communities who need it most. Donations go to support such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, and the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies. Or if you prefer, you can earmark your donation to go directly to the guest you just heard on today's show. In order to facilitate this donation work, we have registered a new nonprofit called Better Burma for this express purpose. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is now directed to this fund. Alternatively, you can visit our new Better Burma website, which is betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit cards. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, We can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to those respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. In all cases, that's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA. If you would like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you so much for your kind consideration. You've been listening to the Insight Myanmar podcast. We'd appreciate it very much if you could rate, review, and/or share this podcast. Every little bit of feedback helps. You can also subscribe to the Insight Myanmar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you can't find our feed on your podcast player, please just let us know and we'll ensure it can be offered there in the future. Also, make sure to check out our website for a list of our complete episodes, including additional text, videos, and other information available at insightmyanmar.org. And I also invite you to take a look at our new nonprofit organization at betterburma.org. There was certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, and we'd like to encourage listeners to keep the discussion going. Make a post, request specific questions, and join in on discussions currently going on the Insight Myanmar podcast Facebook group. You're also most welcome to follow our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts by the same name. If you're not on social media, feel free to message us directly at info@insightmyanmar.org. Or if you'd like to start up a discussion group on another platform, let us know and we can share that forum here. Finally, we're open to suggestions about guests or topics for future episodes. So if you have someone or something in mind, please do be in touch. We would like to take this time to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Currently, our team consists of 2 sound engineers, Mike Bink and Martin Combs. There's of course Zach Hessler, content collaborator and part-time co-host. Ken Pransky helps with editing, and a special Mongolian volunteer who is asked to remain anonymous does our social media templates. In light of the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, a number of volunteers have stepped in to lend a hand as well, and so we'd like to take this time to appreciate their effort in our time of need. And we're always on the lookout for more volunteers during this critical time, so if you'd like to contribute, definitely let us know. We'd also like to thank everyone who has assisted us in arranging for the guests we've interviewed so far. And of course, we send a big thank you to the guests themselves for agreeing to come on and share such personal, powerful stories. Finally, we're immensely grateful for the donors who made this entire thing possible. We want to remind our listeners that the opinions expressed by our guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the host or other podcast contributors. Please also note that as we are mainly a volunteer team, we do not have the capacity to fact-check our guest interviews. By virtue of being invited on our show, there's a trust that they will be truthful and not misrepresent themselves or others. If you have any concerns about the statements made on this or other shows, please contact us. This recording is the exclusive right of Insight Myanmar podcast and may not be used without the expressed written permission of the podcast owner, which includes video, audio, written transcripts, or excerpts of any episodes. Also not meant to be used for commercial purposes. On the other hand, we're very open to collaboration, so if you have a particular idea in mind for sharing any of our podcasts or podcast-related information, please feel free to contact us with your proposal. If you would like to support our mission, we welcome your contribution. During this time of crisis, all donations now go towards supporting the protest movement in Myanmar through our new nonprofit, Better Burma. You may give by searching Better Burma on PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, GoFundMe, and Patreon, as well as via credit card at betterburma.org/donation. You can also give right on our Insight Myanmar website, as all donations given there are directed towards the same fund. And with that, we're off to work on the next show, so see you next episode.
Go!